I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 255 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. My interview today is with Karen Hardwick, and our topic is chasing slow. So I had the opportunity to meet Karen through a mutual connection who introduced us, and I am so grateful for having had this introduction. I am embarrassed to say I did not know of Karen's work until the introduction. And then I went down the rabbit hole and really just sank my teeth into the phenomenal work that she is putting out in the world. Karen has a book called The Connected Leader: 7 Strategies to Empower Your True Self and Inspire Others. And not surprisingly from that title, her real expertise lies in the area of connection. What is fascinating to me about Karen is that she anchors that in connection with self. So she looks at it as connection with self, and then how that allows us to effectively connect with others. And that concept of staying connected to self, can sound a little foreign if you haven't poked around in this work very much. So Karen talks a lot in this interview about her own practices that she uses to stay connected to her own feelings, her own sense of self, her own journey, and then how that really opens her up to be connected to others, both at home and as a leader. So Karen does a lot of work in the corporate arena. Her leadership principles and strategies have really been the catalyst for transforming the lives of countless leaders in the Fortune 1000, giving them tools that aren't always taught in a corporate environment. And one of the reasons she can do that is that she has master's degrees from Princeton Theological Seminary and Rutgers, and then has decades of experience on the front lines, really working as a leader. She's psychologically and spiritually trained, in other words. And that's a really powerful combination, as you're going to hear during this interview. So I recorded this interview with Karen kind of in front of a studio audience, if you will. There were women in one of my coaching programs who were able to listen in, and we unpacked afterward the things that Karen spoke to us about for another hour. So there's so much in here that's so good. Her concept of chasing slow, I think, is just brilliant. And we talk a lot about the relationship between our desire for control and how that can get in the way of our desire for connection. So here's the interview. Without any further ado, please meet Karen Hardwick. So Karen, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here.
Oh, Sherilyn, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, since I've already introduced everybody to you, I am going to ask you to share with us, what have you been up to today? What's been on your calendar before you got to this, and what's going on after this?
Oh, that's a cool question. I started my morning like I always do with my practice, Sherilyn, of chasing slow. So that means I sit in my prayer chair and journal and read and meditate and do all the things that allow me to move into my day like a sane person. And then I took my golden retriever for a walk. So it's about 50 degrees here in Montana. And we're looking at the mountains, and it's this wonderful way to just clear my head. And then it's breakfast time, and it's talking to my team, and it's connecting to my son. So all those things that just allow me to feel like, here's my purpose. Yeah, here's my purpose. I can
hear it in your voice. What a great kind of morning setup to get to hear. Anything big going on after this today?
It's client calls. It's some writing deadlines. Yeah, it's a work day.
Yeah. Well, given that we talk a lot about balance and how people fit all the moving pieces in, it's always great to get that kind of peek behind the curtain at real women doing it their way, right? What are the things we're making time for? What are we saying no to kind of fit it into a life? And that is so part and parcel of what we're going to be talking about today, because we're really going to talk about the good stuff in life that makes it worth it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So how us a little bit about your path to this work. How did you end up as someone who is focused on connection?
It's so interesting to me that how our stories, those meaningful seminal events that shape us and influence us, often start when we're unconscious of those. So my pursuit of connection, which I believe is really the bomb, I mean, it's the antidote to all of the things that are happening in the world today, really happened as a child. So as you probably know, Cheryl Ann, when I was 10, my mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And it was in that moment where I became an adult, like totally unprepared to be one, and yet totally willing to be one if it could save her. So listen to what I'm saying. I mean, that is the baggage I've carried around my whole life, that it was my job, right, to save her. And here's the connection piece. In my desire to connect with her and to save her and to heal her and to rescue her and to do all the things that I needed to do, because what 10-year-old wants to face a life without mom?
Right.
Doing all of those things caused me to disconnect from myself. Now, at 10 years old, I didn't know that.
You didn't have that language.
But I know it now after doing all the work that I've done on myself. So I became a superhero, putting my superhero cape on. And this is the problem with all of us. A lot of times when we get off track, we're using a gift we have to an excess. And then the gift, to use your word before, Cheryl Ann, comes out of balance, right? So I used my gift of empathy and connection, but it was out of balance, because connection as a 10-year-old trying to save my mom was about connecting to others and forgetting that connection to self. So here I am, many moons later, helping other people to understand that all connection has to start with ourselves. Moms, spouses, partners, friends, executives, entrepreneurs, we do ourselves damage when we don't hit the pause button and learn that all connection starts with ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's so interesting, because I don't think we often use the word connection to describe our relationship with ourselves. Right? It's a word that's sort of reserved for others. And so that knitting back together of what does it even mean I would think of the word like disassociated from yourself. And there's probably a similarity in the way you use that language. So that's so fascinating and heartbreaking, right? That there's this unintended consequence of trying to be of service, that it can break or sever the connection to ourselves.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, and you said it so brilliantly and elegantly. Yes. How many times are we pursuing relationships with others when we don't have a relationship that's honest and meaningful with ourselves? So oftentimes what that means is that we're hustling for approval. And I was talking to an executive about this the other day. Now, this is an executive who's at the top of her game. And I mentioned something to her, really top of her game, successful beyond imagination, no matter how we define success. And I said something to her about hustling for approval, and it really stopped her in her tracks. Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh, I have to really sit with that. Next week, she came back and she's like, you're right.
Yeah.
Like all these things that I do are really about hustling for approval. Yep. And it's like this dirty little secret that we do because we feel unworthy, even while the outside looks so good.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. It's the never enough sort of mantra, right? It's never enough. It's just that what's the next thing I'm going to do to get the next piece of praise, to get the next accolade, so that I can just ride that high a little bit longer, like that hedonic treadmill kind of idea. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I loved what you said before. When we talk about connection, we're usually like, well, can we get a cup of coffee? Can we have a meal? Can we do something together? Mm-hmm. And what I say is we can't lead or connect with other people in meaningful ways until we connect with ourselves in honest ways. And self-deception has been elevated to some kind of entertainment. We are a species that deceive ourselves. And so it's all about kind of pulling that all back and finding ways to uncover the real self. Who are we? And what have we had to give up in the pursuit of fitting in and belonging and approval and success? And that's when the magic really happens.
And what does that let us do? Like, what is that magic that, because you can almost taste it, that, okay, it sounds like if I really reconnect to my most authentic, true desires or my wiring or just like what lights me up, I would be a better human, right? I'm probably more open to plugging into other people at that frequency than I am if I'm living some fake life. So what does it open up for us when we do kind of reinitiate that connection?
Well, I want to be really gentle with everyone because we all do this. So there's no judgment here. There's no criticism here. I think we have to be very self-compassionate, Cheryl-Ann, as we unpack this, because this is how, in many ways, our culture treats us, like we're some commodity and we have to figure out how to trade on our currency. So I think what it gives us is it gives us this sense that there's real strength in vulnerability, that there's importance in rest, all the R words: rest, renewal, restore, refresh, all those things that give us fuel so that we can move through our days. I think it also is really inspiring for other people. I was with a CEO and her top 50 leaders last week, and the energy in that room was electrifying because we were talking about connection and self-discovery, and the CEO was role modeling it. So I think what it does is it really invites people into a psychologically safe place,
Sure.
and it makes us more appealing.
Yeah, I do think that people who are in touch with who they are more appealing. I think that's a great word. Like it takes them off the pedestal or out of like the fake suit, and there's just a magnetism when someone really is being themselves. You can almost feel it. So do you need both people in the equation to be in that state for the connection to have potential?
What a great question. Yes, and sometimes that's not always possible. So I think that one person might be kind of setting the tone at times.
Okay.
Like, this is possible. I'm doing this. This is how I'm doing this. So I ratted myself out to my team last week. Really important part of self-connection. I'll spare you all the gory details, but there had been some toxic dynamics on my team, and I got caught up in some drama. So even though I've been doing this work for years, we can all get pulled into that kryptonite, right? That calls us so easily. And then I'm looking in the mirror and thinking, how in the world did this happen?
How did I get here? Right.
So I had to address the drama. A person exited our team. And then I went to two folks on my team to say, I owe you an amends. I apologize. This is what happened. And so when we can connect to her, and man, that is a humbling experience, right? Who wants to do that? Who wants to do that? Because you're supposed to be like, well, I'm supposed to be like the person in charge. And I think as parents, as spouses, as leaders, when we hold our heart in our hands and come to somebody humbly and honestly and say, look, I'm writing myself out. I too am a bozo on the bus. I just made a mistake and I owe you an apology. And I'm not just going to use words. I'm going to ensure that my actions match my words. The two team members were like, what? Like, what do we even do with that? And thank you. Wow. And that's not to lift myself up on a pedestal, because I was really in the pit at that time. That's just to say that that's one way to deepen connections. It matters.
Yeah, well, it's humility, right? I mean, as a spiritual practice, the idea of humility and then of sort of righting those wrongs wherever they've occurred. I think I've shared this with our audience before, like doing that with my own children is probably one of the most powerful places. And you referenced that. I mean, it is such a teachable moment to say to them, I totally screwed this up. You know, that was not me at my best. You just watched me really screw that up and I owe you an apology. Like that we're modeling what we really would dream of them doing. And they may not have the emotional maturity to do it yet. But man, the more times they've seen us do that, the better the odds are that someday they'll do that for someone else, even if they don't do it back for us. And I've started to see it in my kids where they do come back to me and say, you know what? I'm sorry. I was wrong. I don't think I did that as a kid. I don't think I had that in me as a child to go to my parents and say, I was wrong. I really screwed that up. But like this modeling cycle kind of sets up the potential. It's beautiful.
Oh, so powerful. You know, I'm going to go on a retreat in a month for a month.
A month.
Like, a month.
That's awesome.
And it's unheard of for me to just be like, peace out, everybody. I'm going. And yet I'm going to go work on some trauma and I'm going to work on some codependency because I don't want this cobbler's children to not have shoes. And so I'm role modeling that. But it was so cool when I told my 20-year-old son, he's like, Mom, you are just a badass warrior. Like, this is fabulous. And then he said, and thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
That's so great. So great. I'm just sitting here thinking about how deep the desire for connection is, right? Like I'm sure someone listening today is like, man, that connection desire is so deep. And yet I know I watch in my own life, there's times where that desire is so deep, but my behavior is the opposite. Like I'll push it away right when I need it the most. What is that?
We're scared. You know, we're just scared. How vulnerable can I be? Can I really let go of this illusion of control? Because connection is this very intimate, sacred process. So, and it's all about letting go of our personas, letting go of our masks. The very thing that we want the most is a little scary. Because that means that we have to show up, we have to let go. And those are really hard things to do. We are neurobiologically wired to connect. Like we crave connection like we do water and air, Cheryl Ann. And yet we do so very many things that disconnect us. And all we have to do is look around us: addiction, suicide, violence, depression, anxiety, skyrocketing, all signs of disconnection. While our culture is holding out these little carrots and dangling these little prizes to us, well, if you have more followers, or if you were able to do it all and juggle all the spinning plates, you too could be successful. If you had a private jet, if you got to sit on the beach and all your family members looked so beautiful in all their white outfits, you too would be connected. So there's all these tantalizing temptations to numb ourselves out and to chase competition and to chase all the things that disconnect us. I mean, in so many ways, we're in a hot mess.
Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. You know, you said the word control really early in that answer. And I think my brain was like, I have to hold on to that word now. And then you came back to competition, which is, I think, if I look at like, what are the enemies of connection, control and competition have to be at the forefront, right? If I'm competitive with someone, it's probably really hard to connect with them. And if I want to control them, or I want to control myself and be in a really controlled, then that has to be just the enemy of connection.
Well, and we're so unconscious in terms of so many of these things that we do. So control, competition, but how about comparison?
Yeah.
How much does comparison like just kill our souls? We're distracted by like, oh, wow, look what they're doing. I should be doing that too. How come they're at that level? I want to be at that. And so it's this and that numbs us. And then that brings up shame. And all these things happen in a nanosecond. So then we justify them. So we get angry at somebody, or we have resentments, or we start, putting somebody under the bus, right?
Or that sort of self-reliance, like whether we call it ego, whether we call it pride, that notion of like, I've got this and I don't need anybody else. That would be another one that I think sparks to the surface of like what gets in the way, maybe.
And I think we have to be really honest about it. Just last night, I was kind of critical in my own head about somebody who I don't even really know. I'm just in a group with her. And what I realized was I'm comparing myself. I'm in this competition she doesn't even know about. So I had to right?
I'm in a secret competition with you. Yeah, you don't even know about it.
Right? But how often do we then justify that? Well, I have the right to say this, or I have the right to think this because of X, Y, or Z. So we start just making up this stuff to help ourselves feel better. That's disconnection.
There's a spiritual connection here, isn't there? And it's not surprising given that you went to seminary and, had that career before this one, but it just feels very clear to me. Can you unpack that a little bit?
So when I define connection, I say 3 things abide together to create emotional wholeness, relational well-being, and spiritual strength. And those things are self-discovery, self-connection. Having a sense that there's something bigger here than just me, that we're here in human school, trying to live out the life that lifts our souls, inspires others, and gives glory to the grace that is bigger than all of us. And then and only then, and we don't have to do any of this perfectly, then and only then are we really able to come to the table and show up with our stories and help grow that connection between us and somebody else. So yes, there is a spiritual connection. And Lisa Miller out of Columbia University is doing brilliant research on how our brains are not just wired for connection, they're wired for a spiritual, transcendent experience. That we are wired for something bigger than ourselves. Yeah. And once we start to pay attention to that, it starts showing up in spades. So yeah, for me, there is a very big spiritual piece to my journey and to connection.
Oh, I'm going to be chewing on some of this stuff for a while. That's so good. I mean, it's such an important thought. There's the spiritual roots, like the connection. When I think about my faith life, one of the things that it really helps me do, like I would call it a connection to the divine, right? Or being attuned to the divine. There's a steadfastness through turmoil, right? Through kind of the storms of life or the ups and downs. And you've had some storms, sister, in your life that you've written about and shared about. And you use the term chaos to describe some of that. Can you connect those things? Like, how does connection help us through chaos? And is that what you mean by chaos when you talk about, are you talking about that turbulence of life, or do you have another nuance to that?
So honestly, I think that it's all chaos.
True.
Right? It's
the good,
all
the
messy.
Bad, and the ugly. Yeah.
Honestly, it's all messy. Life is messy and it's amazing. That doesn't mean that we lean into toxic positivity. We can't have good attitudes about everything. Some things are just really god-awful, painful, and brutal.
Yeah.
And so let's call it what it is, right? And all the good thoughts are not going to change how painful and heartbreaking and brutal certain things are in life. For me, the spiritual connection keeps me grounded and anchored. It allows me to tap into a resilience and a faith that this too will pass. It's like the Old Testament story about, Joseph was thrown into the pit by his brothers who were so jealous. He had a part in that. So when he was in the pit, he was thinking, I think I had a part in this. Like maybe I wasn't the easiest brother. And so later on, decades later, when his brothers came to him, and this is where I think the spiritual connection comes. Joseph had an awakening and he had all this wisdom. And he said to them, you meant this for harm, but God meant this for good. Mm. Now, that doesn't mean that the divine is creating painful situations for us so we can grow. But I do think that there are lessons and wisdom in the pain. And unfortunately, us humans don't learn when things are going well.
Right. Yeah.
Right? We don't.
Oh, it's true.
Yeah. And I think that there's such grace in so much of the heartbreak. And yeah, I have walked, God must think I'm a badass.
Yeah.
Because I have walked through some really tough things. Addiction, my mother's death, abuse, my husband dying of Alzheimer's. There have been some things that make chaos seem a little positive, to tell you the truth. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot going on. And so I like to tell my story because it gives people hope.
Yes.
We do recover. We do rise up. We do come on podcasts and we have lipstick on. Yes. And we look like we're okay because we are okay. And that's where the spiritual connection comes in for me, Cheryl Ann.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's such a depth of that. You can see the peace in your face, and we'll only be sharing the audio of this, but like I get to see your face through this, and there's just such a deep well of peace in your face. And that's, I think, the power that this brings to your life through all of that chaos is there's this sense of like, there's something that transcends, and it's your connection to yourself, your connection to the divine, your connection to others. And that's the core really of what you're here to teach. So I'm just grateful you're sharing it with us today because we can see the fruits of it. I can see it right in your face.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Mm.
If you could speak directly to someone listening today and tell her, what is something that we can do to feel more connected starting right now? Like, obviously we cannot flip a switch and the whole thing changes, but what's one practice that someone could do today?
It's what I call chasing slow. Yeah. And for me, that starts with a morning practice. I referred to that earlier, Cheryl Ann, right? Like it's about, okay, first, coffee comes first, no matter what.
No matter what.
So I grab my coffee and I sit in what my son calls my prayer chair. And that's me and God time. That's me and me time. The philosopher Pascal said that all human misery flows from the fact that we are not able to sit by ourselves in a room.
Amen. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that's my time to sit alone with myself, the messy thoughts, the ugly thoughts, the unlovely thoughts, and also the hope and the grace, and just be with myself and be with God, the God of my understanding, and prepare myself for the day. And I think the more we do some kind of chasing slow practice, that's where I read my recovery literature. It might be when sometimes the spirit moves me and I have an idea for my business, but it's just about being quiet enough to hear the ancient wisdom inside of us. And when we do chase slow, I think it allows ourselves to hear our hearts healing. It allows us to hear our soul sighing, and it also allows us to see how our lives are changing. So it's that chasing slow practice that I think is a game changer.
Yeah, there's reflection in this, right? The practice of reflection is how we notice those things that, otherwise we're just head down doing, and there's no kind of pick your head up and assess the situation, reflect, drop in. Yeah, it's a beautiful practice. So hard to do. Oh. I know, someone listening is like, great, with what free time? And look, it's not like Karen is floating in free time any more than the rest of us are. I think this is a practice that is cultivated by choice.
Yeah, it's very hard though. I mean, I'm in the stage in my life where I don't have young children, but I started this practice, Cheryl Ann, when I did. And I started this practice, really doubled down on it when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I'm like, I've got to figure out something to do for myself that quiets the terror and allows me to feel hope and a sense of faith. So yeah, it's very hard, but I was up early then, like at 4:30 or 5 to get the time.
It always, we talk about this a lot in Brilliant Balance. Like the time is there for anything we want. It's where are we going to allocate and choose? And that's always about what do we say yes to and what do we say no to? And part and parcel of your message is you say no, you say yes to this because it opens up all kinds of other possibilities once you have that clarity and you've, kind of reestablished that connection with your own truth, right? Otherwise you're running around I just recorded an episode that's about stop checking boxes and start making choices. And I think we get into box checking when we're not connected, right? We're just going to do the things everyone says we have to do. But this practice of saying, I'm going to get back in touch with myself, kind of check in, that's going to help me make better choices all throughout my day. So I think it's powerful.
Absolutely. And one of my mantras right now in this season, and thank goodness for it, is no is a holy word. And I am practicing saying no to people, to places, to things. If it's not fueling my growth, the connections that really are important to me, my spiritual awareness, I'm not doing it. I am not doing it. Of course, I still have to pay my taxes. We can't say no to that, right?
Right. Very few things in life.
That's right. That's right.
Precious few. Oh, Karen, where can people find your work online? And then we will link that up in the show notes. KarenJHardwick.com. And we have this cool complimentary tool. It's something called My Connection Manifesto. It's a journaling workbook for self-discovery, and it allows people to start identifying the connection pillars on which they can build a life of connection. And we're getting a lot of really wonderful feedback about it. So people can go on there and download it. And we'd love to have you, just be a part of that. Part of that community. It's another way to drive connection, right? I mean, really, I think in today's world, these online communities are a part of how we can derive connection, right? When we can't find people who want to connect with us about the things that are exciting to us and deeply important to us in our real lives, right? In our neighborhood or our school, there is this opportunity to sort of cast a wider net. And I think the online communities are a really great way to do that. So I'm glad that you have one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sherilyn.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for being here with us today. I think I could let this interview go on for 3 times as long because this is my jam. This is a lot of the stuff that I'm thinking about in my private time these days. So I'm really, really blessed that you were here and so grateful to you for your time. Thanks for all of it.
Well, I was blessed too. Thank you. A million thank yous.
All right. Thank you for listening to this interview until the end. If you are new to the Brilliant Balance community, if someone sent you this interview and it was your first opportunity to connect with us, please join this community. If you go into Facebook groups and search Brilliant Balance, you will find us. We are happy to welcome you into our growing circle. Also follow along on Instagram at @CSchoolNikki or Brilliant_Balance, or do both. We share different things on those 2 accounts. And definitely make sure that you subscribe to the weekly. That is your best place to stay up to date on all things Brilliant Balance. And you can do that right from the homepage at brilliant-balance.com. That is all for today, my friends. Till next time, let's be brilliant.
This is the podcastfactory.com.